It could be a hardware problem, a software problem, bad weather forecast, low clouds, high winds, threat of lightning. On my 40th birthday, I got scrubbed because a container ship sailed into the part of the ocean where the booster rockets were going to come down after launch. So they ruined my 40th birthday. But the reason so I've gone to bed 10 evenings in my lifetime expecting to launch the next day, and it only happened 4 times. So the reason you don't see any worry on anybody's face there is because we really didn't think we were going anywhere. But we did. And the challenge you have to get anything into space is you have to get it going really fast. And this vehicle sitting on the launch pad is the size of a 15-story building that weighs 5 million pounds. And you need to accelerate it to 17,500 miles an hour in 8.5 minutes. That takes a lot of energy to do that. The bulk of it for the first 2 minutes came from those 2 white solid rocket boosters. They produce about 6 billion pounds of thrust and burn for 2 minutes. And that would get us to a point where we were about 25 miles high, about 25 miles down range, going 4 times the speed of sound, which at that point we're already faster than a rifle bullet, but we're just getting started. The 3 engines on the back of the orbiter, here, the liquid engines, are being fed liquid oxygen from the top of the tank, liquid hydrogen from that barrel section there, and they started 7 seconds before launch, and they ran the entire 8.5 minutes to get us into orbit. So they produced about 1.5 million pounds of thrust in total between the 3 of them. A couple of other small engines here on the back we're not using. Those are designed just to be used in the weightless environment. So I use those during the rendezvous to change our altitude to rendezvous with the space station. And we also use those to do the deorbit burn to slow down to come home. Once we got to the velocity that we needed, we talk about it in feet per second. It's 26,000 feet per second. The computer shut the engines down. We separated from the tank. This was the only part of the space shuttle program that was not reusable. And it would actually fly around the world and re-enter the atmosphere over the Pacific Ocean and burn up. Here's the station as we found it. 3 modules. The center and lower ones were built by the Russians. The top one is a US built, we call it the Node, and it's like the hub of a Tinker Toy set. So you can attach things at the top and the bottom, and then every 90 degrees around the side. So we put the space station together like a huge Tinker Toy. And it worked just fine. I mentioned that my spacewalkers went out on 4 consecutive days, and we'll see them in a minute in a video that I have. I never got tired of looking out the window at the Earth, because you never see the same thing twice here. And so we're actually in this picture here. This is Galveston Bay. So the city of Houston is just off the side here. Here's the interstate going down to Galveston Island. Down here, Clear Lake is right here. So Space Center Houston's right there. So you're in this picture, so smile. If you could look over your shoulder during launch, you could see the peninsula of Florida laying on its side. Here, and you can see in the sun glint, you can see the Florida Keys going down to Key West. Island of Cuba just off the coast, or just off to the south there. The Bahamas just off the coast of Fort Lauderdale and Miami. Got about 600 laps around the planet, I guess. And so, I know the Earth as well as we know our ride to work. I know where the speed traps are, the potholes. Here's a nice view of the eastern Mediterranean, and there's a lot in this. I'll start at the top here. That light blue that you see there, that's the Black Sea. The mountainous area is the country of Turkey. The island of Cyprus, which looks like a big horseshoe crab, is right there in the eastern Mediterranean. Down here, further south, this dark green triangle, we're over Egypt here. So that dark green triangle is the Nile River Delta. And at the bottom, you can actually see the Nile River coming through this gray area, which is the city of Cairo. Just to the west, there are some white dots. You say, well, what are those white dots? That's where some of the pyramids are. And for hundreds of years, tourists have been going to look at the pyramids, and they walk around and they kick up the topsoil, and then the wind blows it away. And underneath it, there's a white limestone rock bed, so you're seeing the white from there. The Suez Canal off to the east here, allows the shortcut from the Indian Ocean up to Europe. And then further to the east, there's a straight line right there, and that's actually a fence. That's the border between Egypt on the left and Israel on the right. And the color difference is because the Israelis are irrigating growing crops on their side, and the Egyptians are not. We see a lot of Mother Nature from up in space. You can see here's a well-defined storm, either a typhoon or a hurricane. And you might get lucky and catch a volcano erupting, which can be quite spectacular. Pretty easy to tell which direction the wind was blowing there. After about 2 weeks, we were running out of oxygen on the mission. That was our limiting consumable. And so we'd get ready to come home. To do that, we would turn around and slow down, use those two engines that I pointed out earlier. And we're traveling at 26,000 feet per second. But to come home, we slow down only about 400 out of that. And that's enough to take us out of the circular orbit that we're in and start us on just a very gradual 1 degree, 1.25 degree descent towards the top of the atmosphere. So we'd start up here at about 250 miles. Top of the atmosphere is down here at about 63 miles. So for the first 30 minutes after we do the dew-reburn, we're still going very fast and we're still weightless as we're descending towards the top of the atmosphere. But we start hitting more and more dense air as we do. It's not a hard boundary, it's just a gradual thing as you come into more dense air. And the orbiter was pretty blunt, and it would build up a bow wave out in front of it. And that bow wave would get hotter and hotter and hotter as you sank into the atmosphere. And in fact, it would get as hot as 3,000 degrees outside. So I remember my first flight, I floated up in my straps and I could see the top of the nose cap of the orbiter, and it's made of a black carbon material, and it was glowing carnation pink. And my eyes got about this big. And then I noticed that there were some burning embers going past my window. And I had a couple of thoughts. My first thought was, wow, the simulator doesn't do this. And then my second thought was, and I hope that's not important. So here's what it looks like from inside. If you look out the window there, you can see it was white hot outside. We were surrounded by what the scientists call plasma. I looked at it and I said, well, I'm not a scientist, but I know what that is. I've seen it before, and it's fire. We're surrounded by fire. And if you saw the Apollo 13 movie where the capsule's coming back in and they show it surrounded by fire for about 20 seconds or so, that's actually close to in reality, you're in the fireball for 20 minutes as you're coming back in. Of course, we were coming in a much gentler and shallower entry than the capsules from the moon. We ended up landing in Edwards Air Force Base in California. The weather in Florida didn't cooperate. In fact, the first day they wanted us to land, it was down, so they waved us off and said, we'll try it again tomorrow. So they were hoping the weather would improve in Florida. It did not, so they said, okay, we're gonna wave you off one more time and try it again tomorrow. On the third day, we had to come home. We were running out of propellant and fuel and other things that we need. And they said, well, Florida's still down, so we're bringing you into California. So we ended up landing out there, and it was no big deal. To tell you the truth, when I rolled out on final, I didn't care what state I was in as long as I had a runway in front of me. So I have a short video here, and it's of this mission. So you'll see some familiar faces. So the first thing we do when you get assigned as a crew is you start designing your patch. And my only input to my crew was to please spell my name correctly and make it so it's a cool shirt logo. So
Wow.
Here we are walking out on what they said was our actual launch day. We actually tried it a number of times. I think we loaded up maybe 4 times. Took us so long to launch that my mother left. Here's what it's like climbing up in our seat. So when the orbiter was in the pad and the vertical, my seat was way up there, so I had to climb up to get into the seat. So here, 4 of us were on the flight deck. 3 were downstairs. Now the downstairs folks don't have a window or a display, so they're just listening. So if you were upstairs, there's some things you can't say. You cannot say, uh-oh, or what was that? Because they'll kill you later. So we actually launched 45 minutes after sunset. So here's the main engine start, and the booster's light right there. And we're on our way. We climbed vertically for 8 seconds just to clear the structure so we didn't hit anything. And then the computers command the vehicle to roll to get into the correct orbit. You can kind of think of the orbit that the space station is in isn't like a hula hoop that's not moving, but the Earth's spinning underneath it. And so we had to wait for the Earth to rotate the launch pad underneath the hula hoop. And we launched into that, and it took us a couple of days to catch up to it. Here's the boosters coming off. As we continued on to orbit, there was a special moment right here when I reached over and I congratulated Pam. I shook her hand. Now, if you remember, she was my only rookie, and we were just passing 50 miles of altitude, so by definition, she had just become the planet's newest astronaut. And that was a big deal. That was a childhood dream of hers, was to do this. So once we got in orbit, it was going to take us a couple of days to catch the space station. You can see the arm of the space shuttle stowed in position there. Here's the station as we came up to it. Now, we were the last crew to go to the space station before there was going to be a permanent crew on board. So when we got there wasn't going to be anybody home. What that did, though, is because the Russians wanted to be able to send commands to to turn some of their systems on and off as we were docking, we had to time the docking to occur as we were passing over a Russian ground site so that they were within range to be able to send commands for turning things on and off. So as we snuck up on the station here, I was going to be looking not out the window at the space station right here, so you can see my head in profile there. I'm looking at a monitor that has this target on it, and this is a camera view of a target on the station. My job is to keep that centered as we close at a rate of about 1 inch per second. And by doing that, the 2 vehicles come together very, very easily. So for me, it was more like a real-life video game. We're out there. We had about 5 seconds to high-five each other, and then it was back to work. So Bill here is operating the hardware that pulled us together, the vehicles together, and latched us. So we've now created a tunnel that goes through that docking system. We pressurized the tunnel, or the docking tunnel there, and that allowed us to open the hatch on our side, and then here we are up on the outside of the hatch at the International Space Station. So I looked inside, nobody home, that's a good thing. I would have been quite surprised had someone been there. Then Mike opens the hatch and he starts to float in, and then he backs out and he said, "No, Brian, you're the commander, you go in first." I thought, wow, what a nice guy. It was only later I learned that he was using me as the canary in the coal mine, sending me in first. So the first permanent crew on the space station was going to launch the week after we were going to land. And they're going to be on board for 6 months. So that's a long time. I didn't want to do that. Give me a 2-week space shuttle mission any day. But the flight surgeons wanted to know what gases are in the atmosphere, so that's not a hand grenade, that's an air sample bottle. So we took an air sample, brought it home so that they could analyze it and know what the cosmonauts and the astronauts would be breathing for 6 months. Here's a little cartoon of some of the robotic work that Koichi had to do with the robotic arm. That's our primary payload. It was called the Z1 truss, and it's about 15-foot cube, weighed about 20,000 pounds. And you can think of it as the brain of the International Space Station because it has all the critical systems on it that we're going to need. So it's pretty important that we be successful on this flight. While we were training, they said, "We know you're going to be busy, but would you mind making a movie?" So I was shooting a scene here with an IMAX 3D camera that's in a movie called Space Station 3D, I think is the official title. Here, Pam's just changing out the film. The spacewalkers said that the coolest thing they got to do was to test fly a self-rescue jetpack. So in the past, when we'd done spacewalks before this, if the safety tether that connected the astronaut to the space shuttle ever became detached or broken and they started floating away, I could always just fly the orbiter over and rescue them if I liked them. So they want to be able to rescue themselves. In fact, that now, whenever they do spacewalks on the International Space Station, they wear these units. They've never had to use one, but it's kind of like you having an ejection seat in a fighter aircraft. You don't want to use it, but if you ever need to, you're glad it's there. So there's LA. You can see how stable he was. He's even able to change his trajectory there so he didn't hit the camera. After the spacewalks were done, we had one more day when we were docked with the hatches open into the space station. And we used that day to transfer supplies. So here we are floating past some unruly cables there, getting into the Russian segment. And you can see the white bags that are Velcroed everywhere. Those are bags we had brought with us, but we had pushed them across to leave them for the permanent crew. So those are bags of food and water and clothing and tools and experiments, and things that they were going to need on a permanent basis. And the next day we closed the hatch behind us, got ready to depart. You saw me ringing a bell. We actually treat the International Space Station as a naval vessel. So there's a ship's log on it and a ship's bell. And there's a tradition to ring the bell to announce the departure of a visiting vehicle. And then to separate, we just commanded some latches open and some springs pushed us apart. So it's a very simple system. Now Pam in the red shirt there is doing the flying. I had her fly the undocking and the separation, the back away. And there was a reason for that. During our training, it became very obvious to me that Pam Melroy would be a future space shuttle commander. In fact, she became the second woman commander in the program. But what that would mean was that the next time she went to the space station, she would be doing the flying. So to give her some hands-on experience as to how the vehicle reacts, I had her do the flying here. I'm pretty proud of this crew. Just in the last year, Pam Melroy and Mike Lopez Alegria were both inducted into the Astronaut Hall of Fame as well. So I feel like a proud dad. See how bright it is up there? There's Leroy going up. He's got a police radar gun. We were supposed to be separating at a certain rate, so we had to determine what we were doing. During the days where we were hoping the weather would improve in Florida, we used them to do some exercise because we hadn't been exercising, using our muscles for the last couple of weeks. Pam's using a bike that we had. I chose to exercise just a little differently. So the truth is it's not much exercise, but it is a lot of fun. Here's Koichi getting a drink of water. And we had a baseball that we planned to give to the Japanese Little League after landing, but we didn't have a bat. We had to use a hammer. And we decided a baseball was a bit too easy, so we had Bulldog try to hit a peanut M&M. Well, he's a much better spacewalker and physicist than he is a baseball player. That's a random reward. On the third extra day, we knew we were coming home. They said it was to Edwards, so we set up an assembly line downstairs to help each other get in our suits for entry. Hard to get in one by yourself, especially in a weightless environment. So here we are on the flight deck. I'm in the left, Pam's on the right. Bill has the checklist in his hand. And we did the do-over burn into California, arrived on a beautiful day, not a cloud in the sky. It was about 4 in the afternoon local time. Rolled out on final at a 20-degree dive, going 300 knots. I'm aimed at a black rectangle that's oiled in the lake bed about a mile short of the runway. So we're just a big glider coming in, no engines. And at 2,000 feet, I start the nose up to transition from a 20-degree dive to a more conventional landing approach. Pam puts the landing gear down at 400 feet, which is right there. And then she starts calling out a cadence of altitude and airspeed. And what I want to hear is 50, 250, 40, 240, 30, 230, 20, 220, 10, 210, touch. And it happens at about that pace. We're slowing down at about 5 knots per second. Pam put the drag chute out at about 180 knots, and I flew the nose down to the runway. The drag chute was very effective. I hardly even touched the wheel brakes. And then after a couple of hours, we had the vehicle powered down. We were out of our pressure suits, and that's Discovery in the background there, our home for the last 2 weeks. But we're able to stand there on the runway and look at the most amazing flying machine ever designed and built by humans. The space shuttle was a true national gem. It could do things that we can't do today. And it was a 30-year program. We flew 135 missions. And so that allowed us to learn how to live and work in space pretty routinely. We learned a lot. The two major accomplishments of the program in my mind were, number one, the Hubble Space Telescope, because it was launched on Discovery, actually, and then visited a number of times by the space shuttle and upgraded. And to this day, just last week, Hubble Space Telescope's rewriting science books out there with what we're learning from it. And the other major accomplishment, I think, were the 37 missions it took to complete the space station, the International Space Station, because it's a marvelous laboratory. It's open 24/7. It allows us to do things in the microgravity environment that we can't do here on the ground. But more importantly, in my mind, when I look at the space station, what I see is the first step to Mars, because we're using the space station to learn what it is we need to know so that we can safely send the Mars generation on their way in the future. I want to thank you for taking the time and for letting me share this with you. Thanks for coming to Space Center Houston. Thanks for bringing the future generation. And I'm going to have time for maybe for one question. She's had her hand up for 30 minutes. She's been very patient. But, yeah, honey. Yeah, okay. How long does it take to get up into space? What would you think? How much? 2 hours? That's not bad. Some people think it's even more than that. It only takes 8 minutes. Yeah, eight and a half, actually. Actually, I learned that I could hold my breath for 8 minutes and 34 seconds.
Oh my God.
That's how long before the engine shut down.
Oh.
So no, but I want to thank you for coming, and thank you particularly for bringing the students. Space Center Houston is a wonderful place with a lot to offer, and I hope you get it all done today. If you don't, come back another day and finish it off. And also, just be aware that they're constantly updating and changing a lot of the displays that are here as well. So I look forward to coming over every time I have an opportunity. So thanks again, everybody. Have a great day.
Alrighty, folks, thank you so much for joining us here at Space Center Houston.